Welcome to Dealing with Change and Communicating More Effectively. I'm Pat Dewar. I think you're really going to enjoy this training because we're talking about change and communicating the difficulties that we have with those, the challenges that it brings into the marketplace, and some solutions for that. So let's get right into this. How many of you would agree with me that under pressure, adults are kids in big clothing? Yeah. If you ever want to challenge that, just cut somebody off in traffic. Do they act all mature and nice and sweet? Or maybe wave at you and call you number one in some other language? They're not acting all mature. Why? Well, why would that be? Well, it's because the way we're wired and the way we're trained ourselves. Because if you were to think about what's the average emotional age of the American adult under pressure, and over, that number has come back to be 11, 12, 13. What's so significant about 11, 12, and 13? Well, that's 7th, 8th grade. That's middle school. And when we were in middle school, we decided how we would respond to pressure. Think about the bully. In middle school, the people that never back down from the bully, that person as an adult under pressure, they turn aggressive. The person that won't take a challenging situation or person on directly, but they do it indirectly. They like talked about you to your friends. That's the second group, right? You know, and as an adult, what do? They plot your demise to your coworkers. And the third group hate conflict, always have. And what do they do as an adult? They will go inside themselves and spew emotional ink, lower the emotional state and productivity of a team. I mean, these are the ones that when they get offended, they become such an energy suck that as they come into work in the morning, lights dim as they pass. I mean, you know these folks, right? And so, you know, these folks, what's happening is they're responding the way that they have practiced since they were in middle school. That under pressure in an event that occurs, like somebody hits your hot button, and how do they usually do that is they throw some emotional brick into your life. And we usually catch that brick with our face. So then what do? Well, whatever we programmed since we were 11, 12, 13, throw the brick back, plot their demise, or go inside and spew emotional ink. So with that in mind, these have become unconscious autopilot programs running in the background since we were very young. And we need to understand that if we start with that assumption that adults under pressure are kids in big clothing, then we understand where they've gone emotionally when they begin to act up or act out. So we want to acknowledge that, and it's become a habit. Now, one of the things I'd like to do to emphasize how powerful habits are is this. I'd like you to take a piece of paper in front of you and sign your name with your left hand. Go ahead, do it now. Just sign your name with your left hand. Okay, you doing that? Great. Okay, so here's the thing. What made signing your name with your left hand so difficult or weird? Well, usually people say it's things like it's not the norm, unless they're a lefty, then they thought that was really cool. But if you're like the rest of us, then it was very awkward because we don't usually sign our name with our left hand. It's something different. It's out of habit from what we've done in the past. And there's a reason why it was so challenging. The reason why it was so challenging is because our minds are made of two components. A conscious mind, which is only 1/6 of the mind, and an unconscious mind, which is 5/6. Now, there's an audio series by Tom Miller called Self-Discipline and Emotional Control, and in it he describes the conscious mind as a rider and the unconscious mind as the horse. So the rider is that logic center, that conscious mind is the logic center, learning, planning, words, force of will, thinking. Those are the uses or functions of the conscious mind. but it only has 1/6 of the mind's power. The horse has, or the unconscious mind has the rest. It has the other 5/6. And if you think about the power between the horse and the rider, if the horse is untrained and doesn't have reins, and you're the rider of that beast, and I pictured here an 1,800-pound Clydesdale horse, and I encourage you to keep that imagery, because if you're sitting on top of that beast, it's untrained. You have no reins. That horse wants to go left. You want to go right. Where are you going? Wherever the horse wants to go, because the horse has all the power. Its functions are autopilot habits. Its agenda is to keep you safe, help you survive. Safe is sane to the unconscious. Different is dangerous. And repetition's the key. That rinse and repeat for about 90 days. And so one of the things that we want to look at is this horse would sit there, and if you're listening to this at work, then it's going, sweet, I got you here. That's awesome. And then just like Mr. Ed of old, he starts to speak in your ear. Hey, whatever you did to get here, keep doing that, because you lived through all that. You haven't died yet. So if you sign your name with your left hand, it freaks out. It's like, danger, danger, Will Robinson. You could die from this because you've never done it before. But I guarantee you do it, 3, 4, 5 times. You do it several times, and it's going to get easier every time you sign your name. Well, what does that mean? It means that once you convince the horse that you're not going to die, then it'll release and allow you to do that activity with more frequency and greater ease, because change is dangerous to the horse. It's scary, and so there's all these resistances that come up. Now, one of the things that I want to do today is give you some keys to create some massive change in the way that you approach change and the way that you communicate with others. So one of the first things I want to do is give you a foundation stone of how we can begin to retrain this unconscious mind to think and act differently, more effectively at work. So one of the first things I want to give you is a couple of foundation stones. Foundation stone number 1 goes like this. What you believe about you is completely made up, and you are the author. You want to think about that. What you believe about you is completely made up, and you're the author. Okay? Number 2 is hot buttons are seeds of self-doubt. So hot buttons are seeds of self-doubt. And number 3, limiting beliefs, confront them with the truth. Limiting beliefs, confront them with the truth. So if we look back at these, you've got what you believe about you is all completely made up, and you're the author. Hot buttons are seeds of self-doubt. And number 3, limiting beliefs, confront them with the truth. I have a question for you. If you're the author of what you believe about you, have you always held the pen? Yes or no? And I encourage you to write down your answer, yes or no. Now, whatever the answer is, it doesn't really matter. I want to, because it's all made up. But what I want to do is give you a little information about how easily it is for someone to have written on your belief system about you, and how that's affected you in your life. And how, so what I want to do is, well, I'll illustrate that by telling a story. And Morning Robinson, I tell stories on every training. And why? Well, embedded in the stories are the tools and the tips and the techniques that I want you to be able to walk away with. So I want to give you keys for learning this stuff easier and faster and remembering it longer. I hope that's okay with you. So one of the first things I want to do is just give you this illustration. about 13, 14 years ago, I was in corporate America, and I sat down with my manager, and the gist of the conversation went like this. He said, Pat, you're really good at what you do, and we would love to raise you into management, but you suck with people. I mean, seriously, people hate you. And all I could think was, wow, is this supposed to be constructive criticism? I mean, really? I'm thinking that there should have been an upside to that one somewhere. But, my manager wasn't trying to be funny, and he wasn't trying to be mean. He was letting me know in his special way, Pat, if you stay the way you are, you'll stay where you are. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to look for where this came from. I'm going to find out where I planted the seed to suck with people. And so doing some soul searching, I found the day. I found the day that I learned how to suck with people, or started that process. The seed of being a jerk with people came on my first day of college. First day of college, I sat down with my academic advisor, and she proceeded to tell me, after looking at my test scores, that 99% of all the rest of the freshmen were placed above me. And their statistics showed that people like me, my academic stature, wouldn't last 6 weeks at this university. And then she went on to say, Pat, are you sure you wouldn't rather go to a junior college and make sure college is your cup of tea? And all I could think was, wow, I've never been called an idiot so proficiently in all my life. I'll send you an invitation to my graduation. And so I set out to prove wrong. I studied 17 hours a day, 7 days a week for the next 2 years. At the end of my sophomore year, I had achieved an overall grade point average of 1.99. Yeah. My meeting with my dean shortly after that went like this. Pat, welcome to second semester scholastic probation. If you don't pull it out next semester, you are going home. Well, that summer, I worked in the oil field like I did most summers to pay for school, and had some time in the evening. And I figured that somebody in history had to have been where I was at, needing to learn how to process information faster, remember more. And I found some tools, and I integrated them into my life. And the next semester, I went from a 1.99 to a 3.25 in one semester. And I never had to worry about my grades again. A couple of years later, got my BS degree. Yeah, it's not all BS, but I did come out with a Bachelor of Science. Anyways, the point is that when I came out, I had this huge hot button on my shoulder. What was the hot button? I never wanted to be called an idiot ever again. So I found that people that take action get results. So what did I do? I began to study everything in the accelerated learning arena. Anything I could find to read faster, remember more, process information at much, much greater levels. And I studied that stuff for a long time. And I got really good at it. I got so good at it, I became an educated idiot. You know what those people are, right? They're the ones that are always right. But that means you're always what? Wrong. Oh, yeah. Try that for very long. You're right. They're wrong. How do you think you're affecting your rapport with them? Yeah, I sucked with people, and it had become an unconscious autopilot level. You see, with that educated idiot, I had that at autopilot level. I was right, they were wrong, and that's the way it was. Well, I needed to figure that out. So I own my career, so I went and invested in myself and found everything I could on how to get along with others. Why? Because one of the first things that I learned was that 85% of your career success is dependent on how well you get along with others at work. If you'd agree with that, then you understand why learning this, integrating it into your life will make such a difference. The next thing I learned was this: one time through anything changes nothing. My mentor said it like this. He said, you're what you are and where you are because of what's gone into your mind at this point. If you want to change what you are and where you are, you must change what goes into your mind from this point. You see, there isn't a single training, a book, or a training that you can go through, a 6-hour training, like a workshop or whatever. They're not going to be able to change you one time through. Most people can only pick up about 15% of the information. But what I found is that if you rinse, repeat enough, everything changes. Why would I say that? Well, in 2005, I got to work with Zig Ziglar and as one of his speakers. And he said, Pat, you got to rinse and repeat enough on anything to get it past the conscious mind into the unconscious mind. Because the unconscious mind is where lasting change comes from. And so as I began to learn that, I found that 90 days can change your life. Now, where did I get the 90 days from? Lots of places. I saw it in research. I've seen it in my life. But the best example was actually my oldest son. He went in the military. And when he graduated from his basic training, I was so excited for him. I went up, shook his hand, and he says, Dad, I just want you to know you were right. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Now, if you're a parent, you know why at that moment my head began to explode. Why? Because I'm convinced that when my son was 13, he was visited in the night by a celestial being, touched in the head, given all knowledge and understanding, because parental influence is no longer relevant after that moment. So when he said that, all I could think was, oh my gosh, the mothership returned my son. And then he said, Dad, I learned the neatest thing while I was here. I learned how to pull my rifle apart and put it back together inside of 2 minutes, blindfolded. And all I could say was, well, that's useful. I mean, I didn't have an answer for that. I was like, fascinating, you know. But why did the military need my son to have that kind of proficiency with his weapon? See, his basic training was about 13 weeks, a little over 90 days. Why did they need him to have that kind of proficiency? Now, a lot of answers that come up are confidence, survival, you know, things that have to do with training of a person, that discipline. But I'll tell you the answer, and I'm going to ask the question to lead you to the answer. Have you ever been in an argument with someone and the vocal variety started to show up and the volume went up? Yeah. And then you get to this point where you're thinking, dang, if somebody doesn't back off, somebody's going to jail, right? And I know you folks that have been married know exactly the moment I'm talking about, right? And so think about that. In that moment, was your heart racing? Was your breath shallow? Was your face flush? Yeah. Now, about 2 hours after that argument, how many of you had this experience? Dang, if I could have said this, I could have won that one. I mean, are you with me? They have this brilliant insight. And the reason that it's taken 2 hours for that thing to get there is because when you're in that argument and that breath is shallow, that face is flush, and your heart is racing, you're in fight or flight. When you're in fight or flight, where does the body need the blood? Where does your body think the blood needs to be? And I usually get all kinds of answers, but here's a good hint: fight or flight. The arms and the legs. The body will send the blood to the arms and to the legs. Where does it drain it from, though? From the brain. So in that moment, the blood is drained from your brain, sent out to your arms and legs. The conscious mind needed that blood there, so it shuts down. But the unconscious, the horse, rears up and says, I got a program for that. You see, the reason why my son needed that kind of proficiency with his weapon is because in that moment, and especially when he was in Afghanistan, people were shooting real bullets at him. Now, the unconscious mind doesn't care whether they're real or imagined, just like the argument. It doesn't know that whether you're going to get into a fist fight or not. In this situation, people are shooting real bullets at him. His body was responding the way that it's been trained for millennia. The blood is drained from the brain, shot out to the arms and legs. His conscious mind would shut down, but when his horse reared up, he had a program to run in that moment, an unconscious autopilot program to keep him safe with his weapon no matter what was going on. They had rinsed and repeated enough to program my son to keep him safe. Well, how does this affect you and I? Well, it's because every day people are shooting emotional bullets at you. In your workplace, at home, they're shooting emotional bullets at you throughout the day. And because the unconscious doesn't know the difference between real or imagined, it assumes they're real. Which means what? Well, it means that in that situation, our brains are shutting down. The conscious mind is closing off. The horse is rearing up. And the problem is that all we have embedded in that moment is 7th, 8th grade behavior. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. Have you ever felt like doing this? Yeah. So, yeah, I'm sure you probably felt that before. Did you did you recognize the 7th grade recess that showed up? I mean, here's a situation where people are frustrated, and sure enough, they act like the 7th grader. I call it going 7th grade Chihuahua. One of the things I want you to understand is that no one gets you offended without your permission. No one can get you offended without your permission. I mean, have you ever had that experience at work where somebody said one thing to you and then did something else? Sure you have. Are you wired like me with a BS-o-meter that goes off every time they open their face after that? Yeah. Why? Because you realize who they are. Emerson said it really well years ago. He said, what you are speaks so loud, I can't hear what you're saying. Maya Angelou said it really well. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. See, what people do is who they are. It's our actions that are everything. This no one gets you offended without your permission. We need to understand, because if we only control who? Just ourselves. We don't control other people. We don't have the superpower to just make somebody stop behaving the way that they do. We don't have that superpower. If you did, you'd have to be up there with Kylo Ren and Darth Vader or something, But by the way, the nerds will really get what I just said. But the point is that, hey, we can't control them. So what do? Well, we have to take the adult mind into those situations that are challenging to us. Instead of joining them in the 7th grade and creating the 7th grade result, we have to take the adult mind. We have to understand that people are always going to do offensive, crazy things. And if we get bent and lose our cool, join them in the 7th grade, you're going to create a 7th grade result. If I'm in an argument with another person, if I get offended and I start pushing back, my actions, remember what we do is who we are, my actions are declaring to that person, you have power over me. This no one can get you offended without your permission is just a reminder to stop giving our power away. People are always going to be who they are. Let's start watching what they do. Now, the next thing I want to show you is what's really going on when someone does get bent and offended. It starts out like this. An expectation is out there, but then reality shows up. And when reality is too far from the expectations, expect to see an emotional discharge. How does that show up? Well, how does that show up? It shows up like this. Somebody came into a workshop that I'm presenting and they expected me to deliver Master Manipulation 504, how to get everyone else to act right, be right, and do right, which does occur. And then I tell them it's a communication skills class with some heavy personal improvement overtones. That could be too far apart. And then you'll see an emotional discharge. Now, how does that manifest? Well, it manifests a lot of different ways. It's in our life, it's just like this. I mean, I could illustrate this point with another story, and then I'll come back to what do we do when someone has an emotional discharge. But if you were to say, like, what did you eat for lunch 2 weeks ago Tuesday? Well, if you could tell me it's Taco Tuesday, right? The same thing every day. But the average person, what they expected and what they got were the same, so there's no need to remember it. But I'm pretty certain, because I've taught this stuff in all 50 states, that you could probably tell me exactly where you were when you found out, the exact moment you found out that second plane hit in New York City on 9/11. I know I can. I can tell you exactly where I was. I live in Fort Worth, Texas, and at that moment, I happened to be on the south end of Fort Worth on Granbury Avenue. I mean, I know exactly where it was. Because in that moment, we went from a la-di-da day to, oh, bleep, we're at war. Emotional discharge. Well, that's the way it shows up. And one of the things we have to do to deal with this is to what I call reframe that reality. You see, terrorists shouldn't blow up buildings, but they did. Well, I'm not going to lower my standard. I'm going to deal with what is rather than what should be. Because what should be is they shouldn't blow up buildings, but they did. Oh, okay, so I'm not going to, listen carefully, should on myself anymore, SHOULD. I'm not going to should on myself anymore. I'm going to reframe that reality to what is. Well, what is there are bad people out there willing to do bad things to Americans. Let's never give them another chance. Well, if somebody came into a workshop wanting Master Manipulation 504, and I tell them it's a communication skills class, and it was some heavy personal improvement overtones, and a discharge goes off inside of their body, and they save it up for me and come up to me at the end of the day and just start screaming at me. Pat, how stupid can you be and still breathe and do this workshop this way? I mean, that would be unfun, but my response would be, hey, Bob, whether I'm stupid or not is irrelevant. Where'd I miss it with you? Now, notice that I didn't do anything with is emotional discharge. In fact, I have a little what I call as a pattern interrupt. I'll lower my hand just slightly to, in a movement just to remind myself of two things. And you might want to write these down. In that situation, number one, quit taking it personally. Quit taking it personally. You could abbreviate that with a QTIP. Quit taking it personally. And number two, stop assuming it's all about you. Stop assuming it's all about you. Why? It may have nothing to do with you. What do you mean? Hurt people hurt people. So we need to reframe the reality and take the adult mind into those situations so that we're not getting out of control. Okay. So how would I reframe that reality? Look, hurt people hurt people. I need to deal with the crater in this person's chest where the pain is coming from rather than the emotional discharge that's coming at me. Because if you try to take on the discharge, it's going to escalate into this huge vortex of emotional energy. And pretty soon you're both going to be sounding like seventh grade chihuahuas barking at each other. Beep, beep, beep. And then what happens? Well, you get to go to another class like I teach. I mean, the point is that we have to take the adult mind into those situations. And that's reframing the reality and dealing with what is. You can create agreements with the discharge afterwards, but don't try to take it on initially. Now, I know why people, don't like hearing what I'm saying right here is because many times we see a discharge, an emotional discharge, as disrespect. And for a lot of us, disrespect, man, somebody disrespects you at work, it's like, dang, you got to be kidding. Oh, no, you didn't. Really? I mean, that's the shoulders go back and you're going to deal with that and you're going to take them on. And the problem is that that'll get you in trouble. You see, if disrespect's one of those things that really gets your goat, hits a hot button at work, disrespect, that programming came in when you were 4 or 5 years old. I remember the day I purchased that wisdom. I was 5. My dad came in one day and he says, Pat, would you mind getting me something from the fridge? And he was an Air Force officer, by the way. You probably know what adult beverage he was asking me to retrieve at that moment. Well, me, I was 5. I heard a question. So I said, yes, I mind. And yeah, how do you think that worked out? Not good. Yeah. Yeah. You think I ever did it again? No. I purchased my wisdom that day. And so that's where that's coming from. Regardless of where the programming comes from, if you want to have better results at work and with people, understand what's going on. They've gone into the 7th grade. Okay. And I mean, just in your mind, you could look at them and just think, wow, so that's what you were like in the 7th grade. Don't say that though, that inside voice, folks, not outside of me, So the thing is that you want to make sure that that you're taking that adult mind into those situations. So one of the things that I want to look at next is a little thing called conflict. Okay. And conflict is destructive when it interferes with important activities. You guys know these. Undermines morale, hinders productive output. Okay. Those are areas where it's destructive, but there are times when it can be constructive. When it results in a clarification of important problems or issues, when it results in identifying solutions, when it builds cooperation. Okay. These are the areas where it can make a huge difference in the results of the organization, but people have to take the adult mind into those situations and not take what other people are doing so personally and stop assuming that those are all about you. So the secret to this process that I'm teaching is that information plus application plus repetition creates transformation. Now, I know that the horse in you is saying, I don't know if I could do this, da, 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 da. And I go, well, I like Ford's quote. If you think you can or you think you can't, either way, you're right. Now, I just encourage you to realize that change takes time. It takes your horse about 90 days to receive programming at the unconscious autopilot level. So you've got to rinse and repeat and try these different concepts until they become second nature to you. Now, the next thing I want to go into is the 4 personality styles. Now, I like to use imagery for this, and I'm kind of a nerd, so forgive me. But when you look at the different personality styles, there's task focused and people focused people. And then there's quiet and expressive folks. Now, most of you would agree that at work, there are both of these types of people that show up. Task focus are all about the list. They want to get their stuff done. They either want to get it done right or they want to get it done now. Okay. And then the people-oriented people, they have a relationship bank. We have to invest in that relationship bank and not take a withdrawal too early, or you're going to have a negative attitude coming back at you. These folks either want to have fun or get along. And the challenge here is that these two people groups see each other very differently. And the unconscious, the horse in us, reinforces this friction, because people-oriented people see task-oriented people as bullies, and task-oriented people see people-oriented people as weak and emotional. And that's reinforced. And so your horse is kind of freaking out. Different is dangerous, remember? But in this situation, if you look at Spock, Thor, Tigger, and Piglet, the most different from each other tend to have the greatest challenge in working with each other. What do I mean by that? Well, if you think about there might be that one person at work that you just can't communicate with. It could be that they're on the opposite end of the spectrum from you. You see, if you could imagine a meeting between the task-focused, quiet Vulcan Spock and the people-oriented, expressive Tigger, right brain creative person, right? Could you imagine a meeting between these two? I mean, the Vulcan's going, dude, I don't go into Pond Far for a few more years. Take a value. And Tigger's going, it's okay. I brought you a Red Bull. I've had 3. I mean, can't you just visualize that? Well, realize that in both parties, the horse in them, that unconscious mind, is freaking out. Danger, danger, Will Robinson. You could die from this meeting. And if you take it to the other side, task-oriented, expressive, decisive. Can't you handle the truth? Thor, that hammer of truth in his hand, right? He has a meeting with the people-oriented, quiet, a little more emotional, a little more indecisive. Piglet, can't you imagine that meeting? Thor's going, dude, make a decision. Piglet's going, oh, I will as soon as you put down that big hammer. I mean, And what do you think the horse is doing in each of those? Freaking out. Danger, danger, Will Robinson. You could die from this meeting. And that's where learning all 4 languages becomes so powerful in your career development and you getting along with others at work. People tend to show up as either task-oriented or people-oriented, quiet or expressive. And so you want to meet them there. Because if you don't, you shred rapport. I'll give you an example. I had a manager come up to me one day and he says, hey, Pat, how are things going? And I already told you I'm a storyteller. So I went into my story and he said, stop, Pat, all I need is an RDCV. I said, what's an RDCV? He said, Reader's Digest condensed version. Man, I only need the bullets. Now, in that moment, did my manager build or shred rapport with me? He shredded it, didn't he? Oh, okay. Well, the next meeting I had with him, because I had been learning some stuff, I walked in with a 3x5 card and I said, bullet 1, bullet 2, bullet 3, we're done. How do you think he responded to that? He said, 18 seconds? Sweet. Make all of our meetings last that long or less. See, all he cared about was a to done, which Thor is all about the to done, right? And so I spoke his language. And what do you think? You think I built rapport or shredded it? I built it because I spoke his language. How powerful would that be? I can give you a powerful case study on this. There's this company called Ameritrade that almost 10 years ago, in a year, they transferred $600,000 from customer service to sales in 1 year. Now, their business model is that people call in for customer support. Customer support is supposed to decide whether or find out whether this client is looking for a place to invest their money or what. And then if they're looking for a place to invest it, they sweep the call over to sales. Sales closes it. Sweet. So in a year, they transferred $600,000. Now, 6 years later, that number had grown to $6 billion in 1 year. 6 years later, it grew to $6 billion. Big difference with a B, right? Billion. Why? What changed is that everyone in the company was trained and coached in these 4 quadrants. The customer service people were trained and coached so well that within 15 seconds on the phone, they could identify whether somebody was task-oriented or people-oriented, quiet or expressive. And then the magic happened. They marked the account with the appropriate designation, whatever they were using. Now, think about that, because that meant that every person that touched that account after day 1 knew how to be in rapport as soon as they pulled the account up on their screen, because it had the designation. I like these. Like I say, I like these because they're, Vulcan, Thor, Tigger, Piglet. They kind of illustrate the personality style all by itself. And if you don't like my images, it's okay. You can make your own up. But what I want to do is I want to actually go through each of these different quadrants and give you some information on their strengths, their weaknesses, what type of activity is ineffective for them, what's effective for them. And so take notes or take a picture of the screen, whatever. I just want to make sure you've got some information on this real quick. So first up, Spock. Spock is task focused, wants to get it right. In fact, their biggest need is to be correct. They pay attention to detail, think systematically, processes. They can be kind of OCD. They communicate indirectly. Now, their biggest strengths are accurate, fact-finding, precise, and organized. And if you want to add a bonus one on there, you might write risk reducer, because they see the flaw in the plan, the error in the data instantly. These are the folks that when you're in a meeting, you're supposed to be doing brainstorming, and someone throws out an idea. Well, the Spock is the one that tends to go, but that ain't going to work. But we've never done it that way. But we don't have any money for that. I mean, whatever it is, they're going to throw out the but, and it's not that their superpowers thrown out there, but it's that they want to show where it's going to break, because they see instantly where something's not going to work. Now, here's how you stop them from being a boat anchor that stops all forward momentum in a meeting. You create some rules of engagement, and you put them on a poster-sized sticky note, and you put it on the wall as you start the meeting, and you say, look, we're going to create some rules of engagement for the meeting today. I'd like to add a couple, and we can interact on some more if you want. Number one, we're going to do each other good, not do each other in. We're going to listen to each other when someone's speaking. If you throw out a but, I'm going to ask for the and. What's the solution then? And then you can add a couple of more. Everybody sign off on it. That way, when the Spock throws out his but, then you go, and what's the solution? And then I would encourage you to listen with both ears and recording device. Why? Because he's going to probably throw out something that has the highest possibility for success, the lowest possibility for failure, because they're risk reducers. So just a way to kind of work within that. Now, Spock's weaknesses tend to be stubborn, boring, unimaginative, change stifler. Now, if you don't like the word Spock or Vulcan, you could use Sheldon, just so you know, it's the same kind of same person. It's not that they're really boring or unimaginative. It's that their horse is on overtime all the time. They're like, hey, why change something ain't broke? You know, their idea is give me enough time to make sure I've got it right. So they'll tend to triple check their data, take longer on a project because they want to make sure it's done right. Right is more important than anything to them. And it stresses them out if you're not accurate. And in fact, that's the ineffective behavior. Tigger, lack of attention to detail, inconsistent, disorganized, being overly emotional, that hyper, you know, people-oriented, expressive, fun person. If that person comes into Spock's office, it freaks Spock out. It's just painful for the Vulcan. It's you know, so you don't want to show up like that. If you show up too animated, they're going to want to run or not have another meeting with you. So you want to show up like them. Know your stuff, schedule the time, make the appointment, be on time, use an agenda. That's a key. And proceed step by step. Get out when you're done. If they have questions, email the answers as quickly as you agree to, whether it's by the next morning by 9 a.m. and then keep your word. That's the behavior that Spock will love and respond to. Accuracy is everything to these people. Okay? So let's go on to Thor. Thor is all about getting it done. They're focused, direct, blunt. They love that phrase, can't you handle the truth? I mean, they like that stuff. You know, they need to be in control, which is fascinating because of what their one of their primary gifts is, or what their real superpower is. They are decisive. They get things done. They're confident. They're risk takers. But the bonus here, if you want to write it down, is they bring order to chaos. Order to chaos. Why would that be so big? Well, they thrive in crisis. You talk to somebody who's a high, get it done kind of mindset, make crap happen, can't you handle the truth? When a crisis is happening, they see what needs to occur instantly. And they will run forward, pulling the resources together to make that so, to get it done and get it done quickly. But here's the problem. Everything becomes a crisis. They get running at such an extreme level that their weaknesses show up, which tend to be intimidate, alienate, use force instead of cooperation. You know, in the mind of Thor, that the concept of, their thought process goes like this. Hey, if I can do it, why can't you? I mean, you get it? It's like, hey, why can't you run as fast as me? Well, the reality is the other three quadrants don't have Thor's gift of bringing order to chaos as quickly and as easily as that get it done does. And so you need to be mindful that if you're a Thor, that hammer of truth, the truth by itself is destructive. I mean, you do not want to ask a Thor, hey, do these pants make me look fat? Because they might come back with, well, yeah, but it's not the pants. I mean, they're that direct. You don't want to do that. And if you're a Thor, you need to realize that that hammer of truth with some consideration and love can really bring life to your team and make you an exponentially greater leader. You have to ask yourself the question, how can the Vulcan hear what I want to tell them? How can the Tigger hear what I want to tell them? How can the Piglet hear what I want to tell them? Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, it's just the concept of, hey, you got to consider the other person's point of view so that your truth can actually get through to them. Now, speaking of Piglet, that's the ineffective behavior for Thor. Too much time on an issue, lack of preparation, being on the fence. Oh my gosh. Yeah, if you're a Piglet and you show up in Thor's office and you sound like, well, I know you gave me a choice on this, a plan A or plan B. And well, if I choose plan A, Bob's going to get really upset. And if I choose plan B, by then I can tell you what's going on in the Thor. There's this scene going on inside of Thor that looks like something out of the Wizard of Oz. I'm melting. Choose, or I'll choose for you. So when you get into Thor's office, you want to be like Thor. Get to the point. Be task-oriented. Be brief. Be right. Be gone. I mean, it's get in, get out. Bullets are great. When you're emailing Thor, you don't want to write any email longer than 7 lines. Why? They don't read past the 7th line. It's direct, to the point. They only need a little bit of information. If they need more, they'll come back to you. But they want to get to the to-done. Their happy thought is a to-done. Their stress is their to-dos. So get in, get out, be quick, RDCV it. Though don't make your people RDC. If you're a manager, no, you want to work with those people, speak their language. When you're dealing with somebody real direct, give them an out and let them have the last word. Just stop feeling like you have the last word. Now, Tigger, let's get down to the people-oriented, expressive, intend to get appreciated, display creativity, warmth, charisma, energy, fun. They like to have fun at work and after work. They're in fact, in their lives, relationships are everything. And especially in their younger years of their career, they might need to feel like they need to be recognized and applauded. They tend to be talkative. They want to express themselves. So their strengths tend to be people-oriented, persuasive, verbal skills, and optimistic. And their superpower is really encouragement. See, Tiggers have a fair amount of empathy. And so what happens is they're the cheerleader on the team. People tend to come up to them going, I just don't think I can do what you're asking me to do. And Tigger says, I went through that corner of hell and I got the t-shirt. If I can do it, you can do it. And people believe them. I mean, seriously, it's like chains fall from people's eyes and limbs and they run through a wall for them. Yeah, it happens all the time. That's their strength. But with that creativity, it brings on their weaknesses. At the extreme, they can be egotistical. They can lack follow through. New shiny object, squirrel. Yeah, it happens. But the reason why is they're a bit of a people pleaser, and so people see them with all that energy and try to get them engaged and helping them with their project. About the 6th person that asks for help, Tigger is going, what was the first one's request? Squirrel. Disorganized. And it's not that they're real disorganized. It's just that they believe in the pile management method on their desk. One pile right in the center. That's just the way they are. So when we look at ineffective behavior for Tigger, if Tigger is creative, expressive, relationship-oriented, who do you think is the least like them? Spock. Rigid thinking, lack of challenge, too many details, following the rules blindly. These are the areas that just blow, pop a fuse in Tigger. It's like, I don't need that much information, and I don't want to know all that, and why can't we think outside the lines a little bit, and stuff like that. If you're too rigid, too many details, like I like to tell a story of a guy I worked with one time. He used to come in at 10 and leave at 2. And everybody else had to come in at 8:30 and leave at 5:30. And usually when I say that much, somebody wants to fire him. I go, let me throw some salt in the wound. The reason why I came in at 10 and left at 2 each day is so he can catch a round of golf before work and after. Yeah, now you want to fire him? Of course you do. I'd ask a couple of questions. One, is this a government agency or a nonprofit, or is it a for-profit company? Well, it's a for-profit company. Well, then the next question you have to ask is, what's this guy's profit? Well, in this particular division, the average among all of the people that were there was $25,000 a month. But this guy produced $125,000 a month, working 4 hours a day. Now, I didn't say sales. I said profit. For those of you that wanted to fire him, do you still want to? Because I asked the owner of that company what he thought about that. And he said, man, if I could get this guy a round of golf at night and increase his numbers, I'd do it. So, yeah, it's sometimes rigid thinking can be ineffective. Effective behavior is be a little more like Tigger. Use some flexibility. Be enthusiastic. Let him talk. Show and tell works well. Color Play-Doh is pretty good. Free food is awesome. After hours are really good. And I jokingly say that, but actually, if you're a leader and you want to increase the stay, the engagement of a Tigger, actually try to find some one-on-one time with them appropriately. Whether it's lunch or take him and his team or her and her team out for after hours and let everybody begin to get a little bit settled, and then you have a coaching moment with them. And they'll be really open, because if you call Tigger to your office, by the time he gets there, his defenses are above his head. Because can't you just imagine his walk to your office? He's having flashbacks of the 7th grade. Now I got to go to the principal's office again, right? So try to speak their language. Let them have some fun. There are even some little things you can do with this. You could go to a Tigger and say, I only raise leaders. I like leaders to be on my team, owners of the responsibility that they have. And so I'm here to help you. I'll help you with any problem you have. As long as you brought 2 solutions with you every time. We'll either use one of your solutions or we'll co-create a third. Does that work for you? And they'll tend to buy into that. And if they don't bring in 2 solutions, sweetly, smiling, remind them of the agreement, and let them go work on it. And say, look, they don't have to be perfect. They just have to show me that you're engaged in the solution, that you're an owner of the responsibilities I give you. Now, because Tigger tends to live with passion and express themselves with passion, when they get upset, they can look a lot like a grenade. What do I mean by that? Well, if you think of information as like a needle for like a sewing needle, if you take a sewing needle and you poke somebody in the arm, you're going to get a response. But what Tigger does is he takes that information and straps it onto a 16-pound sledgehammer of passion. And so there's so much more energy in the impact, which looks like a grenade. So when they're going grenade, redirect their focus, get their attention. In fact, one of the things you might do is this. Say, look, you need to be heard with 100% of my attention. And I've been kind of distracted by what's going on this morning. And here's what I'd like you to do. Go to the conference room and start writing down everything that's going on. Just data dump it. I'm going to go get you a bottle of water, me a bottle of water, and clear my head. I'll be in there in a few minutes. You deserve 100% of my attention. Okay, thanks. And send them. And then if they begin to write something down, awesome. Why? Because they came in their right brain freak out. They're in fight or flight. So there's no blood in the head. If you get them to write something down, give them a few minutes to cool off, the blood begins to return to their head. And if they start writing things down, they're switching to their left brain logic. And when you get there, you don't have a detonation to maintain. You have an agenda to follow, and they feel completely heard. And then sarcasm is one of those things that shows up a lot at work. And one of the things you need to realize about sarcasm is whenever somebody's using a sarcastic remark, which, by the way, for those of you that use those a lot, the origin of the word sarcasm is two Greek words, sar and chasm. It means ripping of flesh. And you might think it's fun, but when you take when Thor takes his little sarcasm ball that he likes to play with his teammates back and forth on, throwing them under the bus and them returning the volley, and then he takes that tennis ball of sarcasm and throws it at Piglet. Between Thor's hand and Piglet's gut, that ball sprouts blades and guts Piglet. I mean, just splits him wide open. And then what happens? The Thor is going, what? We're just funning. Goodness gracious. You get a little thicker skin, you can hang with us. And Piglet's out there bleeding out on the floor, making a mess, so to speak. And you got to realize that sarcasm tennis ball that you guys tend to play with, that needs to be kept between you and other people that smell like you, that are from your tribe, that are Thors, people like that enjoy that sort of stuff. So with that, and if people are throwing sarcasm at you and you don't like it, you want to just sit there and recognize what's going on. What they're doing is showing everyone else who they are, which is someone who likes to put somebody else down. So it really, you don't have to quite get so offended and bent. Remember, nobody can get you offended without your permission. So Piglet. Piglet is the people-oriented, quiet, and tends to get along. They like to be a people pleaser. They want to be agreeable. Their biggest need is to be liked. And so when you look at the way that they, their strengths being likable, loyal, team player, patient, many times Piglet tends to show up early, stay late, and help with the cleanup. They are the ones that will, have absolutely really sucky boundaries, but we'll talk more about that. They want to please. And their superpower is empathy, if you want to write that down, empathy. And when I say empathy, I mean empathy like freakish. In their life, they have the ability to draw into themselves the pain of other people. It's why if you've got a Piglet on your team, they're the one that is always trying to. Everybody shares their story to them. Everybody loves to just tell their life story every time they go by, whatever. If Piglet sits down on a park bench somewhere in America and some soul gets within 10 feet of them, stays over 11 seconds, that soul's going to come over and speak and just kind of puke their life story on Piglet, because that's just the way they're wired. They're kind of a receiver. When they come into work in the morning, it's like darts go from their heart to everyone in the room. They always know the emotional temperature of the team. It's just the way they're wired. Empathy. So Piglet's weaknesses tend to be indecisive, wasted time, overly emotional, illogical. And these all come from people pleasing. The rejection to a Piglet is the most painful thing of all. If you reject them, if you speak harshly to them, they feel it like you struck them physically when all you did was speak to them. It's the way that they're wired. So be careful with that. Be careful. And then ineffective behavior is Thor, ignoring the feelings, forcing the decision, being too intense or formal, threatening. Okay? And every time Thor uses this tactic on a Piglet, it's like him taking his hammer and racking it on side of Piglet's head. Well, you might be thinking that you're going to toughen Piglet up, but you're not. You will transform Piglet. And about the fourth or fifth or some number of pings, Piglet's going to transform into a puffer fish and detonate. And then Thor is impaled against the wall, wondering, where'd that come from? Usually you're real sweet. We need to send you to training or something. So it happens all the time. The thing you want to do, if you're one of the other quadrants, when you're around Piglet, be Piglet. Be casual, sincere, slow down, lower your voice. Let it be okay for them to tell you the truth about the way they see something. Set goals, build them up. Build them up. If you build up a piglet because they're already jacked into everybody's heart every time they walk into the office, they can transform from a thermometer telling you the emotional temperature to a thermostat balancing and buffering the emotional state of the team. They have an amazing gift, and we all need each other. So, a couple of things here to wrap this up. When promises are not kept, you want to confirm and reconfirm mutually acceptable decisions. These usually happen when a piglet gets overcommitted because they really just don't want to say no. And you need to make sure that they learn how to do that. It's okay to say no or redirect me on what needs to be done. And, I hope that through this training, you have begun to see the value of speaking another's language, understanding what's going on when people get upset and challenged, and what it takes to really create lasting change is enough rinse and repeat to create the transformation that you want. And with that, I really just want to wrap this up with a thank you. Thanks for listening to this training today. And I wish you every good thing in the world, every success in the world be yours. Thank you so much.